brothers, my sisters. I remember as a boy watching my dad fix cars. He has this way, all he has to do is stand and listen to an engine running, and he can tell you what's wrong with it. If it drives by on the road, he can tell you what part needs to be replaced and what's wrong with it. I remember him going into a car that he had never been in, just taking it apart and figuring out exactly what was wrong and how to fix it. And I said to myself, I'm never going to be able to do what my dad does. It just seemed impossible. I wonder sometimes if we think that way about sharing the faith that we have. Where it just feels like actually doing the difficult job of sharing the news of Jesus Christ with someone who may or may not like what we have to say is just something that I'm not sure that I have the gifts for, the ability to do. That's good for you, Pastor. That's your job. You've been trained in it. You've done it before. It's what you get to do. And yes, I do it, and I do it a lot. And I think I'm okay at it. Don't always know. Hard to tell. But I do remember one time a member of the congregation, longtime Christian, watching me talk to someone who had just walked through the door, and he came up to me and he would never guessed that this man would say this. He said, Pastor, I don't think I could ever do what you do. And he was wrong. When we ever start to think that some of these things like that are beyond us, I think we need to listen a little bit to what Jesus says and does in our text today. It is true that sometimes there are challenges when it comes to witnessing the faith that make it very difficult, and we shouldn't think or dismiss that and think lightly of it. We should also understand what God has promised to you. Our text today, we're almost done with this sermon series. Not quite, but almost done. Comes from Matthew chapter 9 and into chapter 10. Part of it is printed for you in the program. I'm going to read one verse beyond that. I decided to add that in today. This is what is written. Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. He said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send workers into the harvest field. Jesus called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority to drive out impure spirits and to heal every disease and sickness. These are the names of the 12 apostles. First, Simon, who's called Peter, and his brother Andrew, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector, James, son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. These 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions. Do not go among the Gentiles or enter any town of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I want to start with that last idea and work our way back. Don't go to the Samaritans. That doesn't seem right, does it? Don't go to the Gentiles or the towns of the Samaritans. Go rather to the lost sheep of Israel. I just said earlier, and we read from Isaiah, that he wanted all the ends of the earth to come to him. So why does he tell the disciples not to go to the Gentiles or the Samaritans, but to go to Israel? When my first car died, I had to go buy a second car. I think I was like a junior in college. And I went out looking for a car. And I didn't make the wisest choice in purchasing my car. I bought one that was cool, which is not usually a good idea, right? Especially when you're on a limited budget. I bought this 1983 Mercury Grand Marquis, but this was done up nice, right? All the windows were tinted. It had been lowered down. It had these big old rims on it. Your flashy rims, right? Had lights that ran along the running board so the road lit up when I was driving it. A big old sound system on the back so I could thump through the neighborhood. I was in heaven. I was the coolest dude, right? It was a lemon. And he immediately started to give me problems. I'd had a car for a while, so I knew the basic stuff. I knew how to change the oil, and even the brakes, I think by that point, they knew how to do that. This was the transmission. And I knew nothing about how to fix a transmission. And so I had to take it to someone to have them do it. Learning how to fix a car, you don't start with the transmission. There's a couple of you who do some car repairs in here. Am I right? Yeah, that's a hard one, transmission. I think that's what Jesus is saying to the disciples. He's saying you're not quite ready to change the transmission or to overhaul an engine. So don't go to the Gentiles. Don't go to the Samaritans even. Start with the people of Israel that you know and understand. There's some wisdom in that, right? When we talk about sharing the faith that we have, maybe the people that we start with are not the diehard skeptics. Maybe not someone who grew up practicing Hinduism. Not that God doesn't want them to come to faith, but it's that it's difficult for us because we don't necessarily know how to do it. Start where? With people that you know and understand. Your own family, your own friends, the people who are like you and that you understand where they're coming from. Share with them first. Right? Start there. Then once you get some practice in that, and once you do that for a while, then maybe you can move on to dropping the transmission and putting a new one in. Maybe then you can go and talk to the hardcore skeptic. And I think there's some value in that too, is understanding that just because I'm not able to do it right now doesn't mean that I'll never be able to do it, because what should I be trying to do? Learn. Figure it out. Think through the challenges that someone might have. Think through the way that we might talk to someone. I still can't do a transmission, but I can do a whole lot more now than I used to be able to do. Why? Because I tried. I did it. I grew in my understanding. It's true of witnessing our faith too. There's books to train. There's people to talk to. There's experiences you can have. We oughtn't ever sit there and say, well, I can't do it and I never will be able to, because God has told us that we should always be prepared. Give a reason for the hope that we have. Why? First sermon in the series, compassion for those who don't know Jesus Christ. The same love that God has for me, I have for those who don't know Him. So let me learn. Let me grow. Let me develop. He also, you look at who He sent out there, right? God sends us out to do His work and be in His kingdom. He doesn't ask us to be something that we're not, or to somehow do something that we're incapable of doing. It is true, like we read in Corinthians, that every single one of us has been blessed by God with gifts. We're all part of the body, and we all work together for the sake of the kingdom. Some people are like this, and some people are like that, and some people are this, and they're good at that, and they're not so good at this. And every single one of us has been blessed by God in different ways. And what God would have us do is go out into the world with the gifts that we have and who He has made us to be His witnesses in this unique way that God has made me. I don't need to be, well, my example of this is Thomas Spiegelberg. So maybe some of you know Tim Spiegelberg up in Firestone. His older brother and I were friends. Tommy Spiegelberg can talk to anyone about anything for any length of time. He has the amazing ability to talk. The joke is always made that he could have a conversation with a phone book. He has, I don't need to be him, because God didn't make me him. But it doesn't mean that God has not blessed me with gifts to talk about His kingdom and to be useful in His kingdom. I need to be me, who God made me to be. You see that with the disciples there, right? Were all 12 of those disciples the same people? Yeah, but you have Peter, right? Peter was what? Yeah, he's a fisherman, so he's a working man, right? Worked with his hands, He was also impulsive, right? Something happened, he pulls out his sword, chops the ear off someone. Jesus like, whoa. Easy. Peter jumps out of the boat and walks on the water. Amazing, right? Breaks out because he sees the wind. Peter was passionate, but he was highly uneducated. You read his epistles in the Greek. We don't see it because they've niced it up for us, but he was terrible with grammar. An English teacher would freak out. Well, not an English, a Greek teacher would freak out looking at his letter because his grammar was bad. He was uneducated, and yet God used him to lead the church and to bring how many people to faith? And then you have John. John was not loud. He was not in your face. He was not like Peter at all. John was quiet, reserved. He always talked about the love of God. He was very soft. I want to talk in a bad way. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? I have a word and I can't remember what it is. God used him to lead the church. You got Thomas. Thomas was, I need proof. Unless I put my hand in his side and my fingers in the holes in his hands, I'm not going to believe. I need proof. I'm someone who is logical. I'm someone who needs evidence. Otherwise, God used Thomas. You got Simon the Zealot. You know what it means that he was a zealot? He was a hardcore political activist on one side of the political debate. So he was tempered by the political debate of the day. And God used him. Matthew, the tax collector, businessman, good with his money, made lots of money, probably a wealthy man. God used him. Point is, when God made you, he made you exactly the way he wanted you to be. He didn't mess up when he made you. He gave you the gifts that you need to carry out the work that he's given you to do. And just because you're not like so-and-so doesn't mean that God cannot use you to talk about his kingdom. Who are you? Who has God made you to be? That's the evangelist you should become. Following me? On top of that, God promises that when we are in a position, we may need something. He promises to always give us what we need to carry out that work. At the end of the section, he says to the disciples, you're going to be arrested, you're going to be dragged before the synagogue, the Sanhedrin, and before rulers. And he says, when you get there, don't worry, because the Spirit will give you the words that you need. Doesn't mean I need to go find the difficult, dangerous situations to share my faith in, but if God should put me in a situation where I am to share my faith, even if it feels like it's beyond me, I should not doubt that God will give me the tools that I need to do the work that he's laid in front of me. Because if he puts it in front of you, he will bless you. When we say that I'll never be able to do it, or I can't do it, what are we saying about our God? What are we saying about the promises that he makes to us? The gifts that he gives? The last thing I want to talk about is the fact that Jesus didn't stop teaching. He went out on this missionary journey, went out and they shared the gospel, and they came back, and Jesus said, good, you're done. He kept teaching them for 2 more years after this. To grow and to train ourselves to talk about these things. There are courses that you can take, and maybe I should run one of those. I will tell you the one thing I don't like about those courses is that they treat every witness person the same, and every person that we are witnessing to the same. You understand what I mean? Cookie cutter. So we learn from it, but the problem is that each one of us is different. But learning, understanding ways to talk about Jesus Christ, learning, growing in what the Bible really says, so that when the opportunity comes for me to tell someone about Jesus and the forgiveness of sins, I'm not sitting there going, God never told us that we should be able to fix our car. He did encourage us to go out and be prepared to talk about that. God would have us participate in His kingdom, talk to people about the forgiveness of sins, about the cross of Jesus Christ, about the hope of eternal life. Pray that you never think that you can't, or that you never feel that God is going to abandon you, that in confidence you openly declare and proclaim the forgiveness of sins in Jesus Christ. He's sending you out into the harvest field. There's a lot of people out there that like the harvest. Amen.
Amen.